Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to be installing the Elevate truck rack system. Now I'm working on a Ram, but most applications have a very similar installation. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and start with installing the T-slot rail. Now obviously if you've got a truck bed cover that's already got a T-slot installed in the rail, you can go ahead and skip this part. But if you're installing this rack with another type of a cover or with no bed cover at all, we have to install this first. So what we're going to do is grab 4 of our T-bolts and insert them through the rail. Once those are in place, we're going to go ahead and install one of our end caps. Now, once that end cap is slid in, we're going to take one of our set screws that will thread into the end cap. Use a 1/8 inch Allen wrench to get it nice and snug. Do not over tighten it. This is plastic threads and it is a steel screw, so you can strip out those threads if you try to over tighten it. All right, and then install the other end cap the exact same way on the opposite end. It's a mirror image of this one. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and temporarily install these tie-down cleats. We're going to be moving these around, so we're going to leave them loose for right now. Just line them up to the T-bolts, like so. Use one of our provided black flat washers for each one of the bolts, and then a nut. And just because we're going to leave these loose, I'm not even going to worry about tightening them down. I'm just going to get it finger tight. It can still move around. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and flip the rail upside down. The bottom of the end cap needs to have a seal on it. This is what your seals are going to look like going there. So on each side, what we're going to do is peel off one of the seals from the kit. I've already wiped down the surface of this end cap with some rubbing alcohol to prep it. And do that to the opposite side as well. All right, now before we go ahead and hang this on top of our bed cap, I just want to throw out a couple of addendums that are very common. Number one, some applications, like most of the Ford applications, is not an actual 90-degree angle here, and so we have to correct that. With the Ford applications, it doesn't go straight up and down here. It's actually a slight tip, so it's a little bit wider up at the top and narrower down at the bottom. If that's the case, this is our taper seal. The way we install that is we take our rail, and on the inside of the rail, we install our taper seal. Just peel off the sticky part and attach it to the inside. The wide part of the taper goes up to the top of that rail. If you have a GM application, a lot of times the bed cap that's hanging down, there's a space between the bed cap at the bottom and the metal flange behind the bed cap. If that's the case, any place where you put a clamp, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have a shim in between the bed cap and the metal flange. If the bed cap and metal flange are together where you're placing the clamp, you don't need to shim. If it's spaced apart where you put a clamp, you need to put the shim in between the plastic bed cap and the metal flange. Now I'm just going to go ahead and move on to this application because we don't have to correct anything behind it. So all I'm going to do is lift this up, set it up on top of the bed cap, make sure it's pushed all the way against the bed cap, and you'll notice that there's a little space between the end of the bed cap on either side, so I'm just going to center it, get that space even side to side, and now I can go ahead and install my clamps. All right, so my first clamp I'm going to put right in the middle of the bed. Spread that apart and make sure we get that up as high as it can go on the bed of the truck. Go ahead and tighten that down first by hand. And then once it starts to bite down just a little bit, I'm using a 1/2 inch by the way to get it nice and snug. Go ahead and seat it at the top and finish tightening it down. All right, now for my second clamp, I'm going to go towards the front of the bed. Now you may notice that this rail is actually kind of tipping up. I want to bear down on that rail as I install it. So I'm just going to lift this up in place, get that locked in, and go ahead and tighten down the clamp. Now as it starts to snug up, I want to go ahead and bear down on the rail, make sure it's properly seated while I finish tightening the clamp. All right, so for our third clamp location, we're going to go more towards the tailgate end of the truck. spread the clamp apart. Again, we want to make sure that it's as far up on the grooves as possible, and also, just like before, get it hand tight. As you start to snug it up, go ahead and force the rail down, make sure it's completely seated, and then finish tightening the clamp. Okay, now you'll also receive some extra seals in your kit. Those are for if you're installing this along with a truck bed cover. Now, you can either refer to your instructions on that, or feel free also to reach out to our service department. Now this is installed, repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and install our rack. Now the first half of the rack, I want to point out, here's the load bar. It's kind of curved up at the top. The bottom side of the load bar is going to be more flat. We're going to start with the flat side on the bottom. We're going to insert both of our double bolt plates. Now we can go ahead and install our end caps. Those are specific top to bottom. The bottom is going to be flat, the top is going to be rounded. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put the other set screw on the other side of the end cap. The opposite end cap installs the exact same way. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our uprights. For the purpose of this install, we're using our telescoping uprights set to the 18-inch setting. We're just going to find the screws and install flat washer and nut. We're just going to get those hand tight for right now. The other upright installs the exact same way. Make sure that the label is facing to the outside. Okay, now to go ahead and install the rack onto the T-slot, what we're going to do is first remove our end cap. So go ahead and loosen up that set screw that we put in with the 1/8 inch Allen wrench and slide it out. Next, we'll be taking 2 T-bolts, sliding them in, and put the end cap back in, retighten the set screw, but just snug. All right, now also in our kit, we're going to have these spacers. What we're going to do is push our T-bolts apart and set the spacers in place like so. Make sure they're oriented to face towards each other, and also the raised portions should be facing up. Make sure you do that same process on the front and the same process on both front and back on the opposite rail. All right, now we also have a rubber gap strip to go into the top gap on the load bar. That's just going to snap into place. I'm just going to go one side to the other. All right, now we're going to take our assembled rack. Now this is still adjustable. We're going to go ahead and line it up and set it in place on each side of the rail. All right, now what we're going to do is install 2 black flat washers and cap nuts onto each one. So right now I've got this just finger tight. Once I have it finger tight, I can, just for the sake of this video, I'm pushing this everything all the way forward to where they're both the same distance from the end of the cab. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down using a 1/2 inch. Repeat that on the opposite side as well. All right, next we're going to center the rack side to side. Once that's centered, we're going to go ahead and tighten the load bar to the upright using a 1/2 inch. All right, now we can go ahead and snug it up on the other side of the rack as well. All right, now the front side rack is installed. The back side rack will install the exact same way. All right, now we're going to go ahead and make sure that all of our hardware is tightened up. All of our base hardware and everything for the upright uses the included Allen wrench and a 1/2-inch wrench. Okay, now we've got all of our upright hardware tightened down. We're going to go ahead and set our tie down hooks where we want them and tighten those down with a 1/2 inch. Repeat that for all 4. Okay, now if you got a telescoping uprights, let me show you how to adjust those. Right now it's in the 18-inch position. What I'm going to do is take my provided Allen wrench and loosen up the nut back here and take that off. Set that to the side. I'll also pull the bolt out and set that to the side. Do the same thing on the opposite side. All right, now both sides have to lift up at the same time. So I'm going to raise both sides and line up one of the holes. Once the holes are lined up, go ahead and put the hardware back in place and get it snugged up. All right, repeat the same for the front and you'll be at the 28-inch ride height. Well, that concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.